Good morning. The Committee on the Budget and Government Operations is called to order. Pursuant to applicable law and my determination that attendance by remote means is necessary because an in-person meeting is not practical or prudent due to the declared public health disaster caused by COVID-19. This meeting is conducted by video conference. We will now have a roll call to establish quorum. Please note that your yes or present response will be deemed a yes vote when this quorum roll call is used as a reference for later items. If you will unmute your phone and microphones. Vice Chair Silverstein, Alderman King, Alderman Hairston.
Present, Chairman.
Yes, thank you, Alderman King. Alderman Hairston,
Present.
Alderman Sawyer,
Here.
Alderman Mitchell,
Present.
Alderman Harris,
Here.
Alderman Sadlowski Garza, Alderman Thompson, Alderman Cardenas, Alderman Quinn, Alderman Moore, Alderman Curtis,
Present. Alderman Moore is present.
Alderman O'Shea,
Here.
Alderman Brookins, Alderman Rodriguez, Alderman Tabaris,
Present.
Alderman Scott,
Present.
Alderman Burnett, Alderman Irvin,
Alderman Irvin is present.
Alderman Taliaferro,
Present.
Alderman Raboris,
Present.
Alderman Wagisback, Alderman Austin.
Here.
I got you, Alderman Austin. Alderman Ramirez Rosa,
Present.
Alderman Villegas, Alderman Mitz, Alderman Spizzato, Alderman Napolitano,
Present, Madam Chair.
Alderman Riley,
Present.
Alderman Smith, Alderman Tunney, Alderman Kappelman,
Present.
Alderman Osterman, Chairman Dowell's here. We have,
Madam Chair, Alderman Susadlovsky Garza is here as well.
okay, thank you, Alderman Sadlowski Garza. We have 20, we have a quorum.
Rodriguez, present, Madam Chair.
Alderman Rodriguez, 21.
Nick Spizzato is present.
Lopez, too.
Alderman Spizzato, I heard you. Who was the next person? Okay, we also
Alderman
have with
Lopez.
Alderman Laspada, Alderman Beal, Alderman Burke, Alderman Lopez. I think that's all I saw. At this time, the committee has been informed that we have no callers signed up today for public comment. So this concludes the public comment period. And the items before the committee, we will begin with the approval of the amended October 2021 monthly Rule 45 report. The report was amended to clarify the defer and publish dates and the final passage dates for items 3 through 10. These reports were previously emailed to all aldermen on December 6th. If there are no questions, can I get a motion to recommend approval of the reports by the
So
affirmative
moved,
vote?
Madam Chair, by Alderman Austin.
By the affirmative vote of all members present for the roll call to determine quorum. Alderman Austin so moves. Hearing no objections, so ordered. Vice Chair Silverstein, I see you and have recorded you as part of the quorum.
Thank you, Chairman.
Today, we have one item on the agenda and one item on the addendum, which we will be voting on, and two subject matter items that we will not be voting on. The number one item on the agenda is an ordinance introduced by myself approving the transfer of funds within the City Council Committee on the budget and government operations for year 2021. Our committee is transferring funds from commodities and materials, from the commodities and material lines at $7,000 and equipment from $6,000 for a total of $13,000 to pay for our court reporting services during our budget hearings through our contractual services line. Any questions from committee members and non-members? Is there a motion to recommend approval of item number 1 on the agenda by the affirmative vote of all members present for the roll call to determine quorum?
So moved by Alderman David Moore.
Alderman Moore, so moves. Hearing no objection, so ordered. The due pass recommendation of the ordinance will be reported out at the next city council meeting on Wednesday, December 15th, 2021. Alderman Quinn, I see you, and Alderman Waggis back, and will be counted towards the roll call.
Thank you, Madam
Thank you.
Chair.
I will now go out of the regular order of the agenda and hear item number 1 on the addendum, which is a direct introduction. This ordinance was emailed to all aldermen on December 6th. It's an ordinance amending section 2-92-644 of the municipal code regarding emergency procurement and is a direct introduction from the Department of Procurement Services. And this ordinance will now be explained by the Chief Procurement Officer, Aileen Velasquez. Ms. Velasquez, Commissioner? Ms. Velasquez? There you go.
Can you hear
Good
me?
morning.
Good
Yes.
morning. Good morning, Chairman Dahl, Vice Chairman Silverstein, and the members of the Committee on the Budget and Government Operations. For the record, my name is Aileen Velasquez, and I am the city's Chief Procurement Officer. Thank you for allowing me to present on behalf of the Department of Procurement Services this morning on a topic of utmost importance to the department and the city. Due to COVID-19, the world has experienced supply chain disruptions not seen in decades. Simultaneously, inflation has increased to rates not seen in 30 years. These unprecedented circumstances have created an imminent risk of supply disruption for key commodities, potentially impacting the health and safety of city residents. Beyond these current circumstances, COVID-19 has demonstrated that the city has to be prepared to swiftly and flexibly respond to all future emergencies. The municipal code currently gives DPS a limited ability to respond to emergencies by entering into new emergency contracts up to $500,000 to protect public health, public safety, and city property. However, the size and scale of the current emergency, coupled with inflationary trends, have demonstrated that the existing limitations on DPS Emergency Procurement Authority prevents the city from aggressively responding to large-scale emergencies like the current situation. The ordinance before you would amend the existing municipal code Emergency Procurement Authority by increasing the dollar limit from $500,000 to $1 million to account for inflation and supply chain disruptions, and extending the Emergency Purchasing Authority to modify existing contracts, not just to enter into new contracts where no contracts exist. I appreciate your time and consideration of this ordinance.
Thank you, Ms. Velasquez. Can you give us a sense of what you're experiencing? When you and I spoke about this ordinance, I asked you to be prepared to talk about some examples of some of the supply chain issues you're seeing and the price impact.
Correct. So today, we have been having a lot of challenges with water chemicals. So specifically, we're talking about chlorine, sulfate, phosphate. We're having problems with steel, and we're having supply chain issues with aluminum. As you know, water chemicals are essential for the public health. We need to have those chemicals on hand and be able to have an inventory, and the pricing today for those due to market trends and the shortage of the supplies related all to COVID and the related shutdowns are impacting the cost. We are seeing increases in those chemicals from anywhere between 22 to 45% to 100% in some instances. So specifically, if we look at phosphate, there's 3 components of phosphate that we procure today. Its current contract price for them is one of those is $4.15. The demanding price today is $8.35. $3.11 is the other one. On contract, the demanding price today is $6.26. $2.56. The demanding price for that is $5.15. On chlorine, the contract price is $3.90. The demanding price for that is now $6.80, and so on. Those are 2 examples that concern me specifically, because these are essential to public health and public safety, and we need to be able to react to that. Today, we're hearing from the vendors that they can no longer provide those chemicals at the current price. We need to do something about that to be able to ensure that even though there's a shortage throughout the world, that we do get what we need to protect our citizens.
Okay, thank you. Before we take questions, I want to acknowledge that Alderman Osterman, Burnett, and Alderman Tunney have joined us and will be counted towards the quorum count. And we also have Alderman Coleman joining us this morning as well. We'll go to questions. I see Alderman Solowski Garza, you have your hand up.
Yes,
Here as well.
Alderman Thompson, we have you. Thank you.
Okay. Hi, good morning, everybody. Thank you, Chairwoman Dow. So right now the threshold is $500,000, which means that you guys can purchase whatever goods and commodities you need under $500,000 without coming to City Council. You're asking us to raise that threshold to $1 million so that you can purchase whatever goods and commodities you need up to $1 million without having to bring it to City Council. Is that correct?
Not anything you need. This authority is for emergency only. So the rest of the needs will go as they do today through a competitive process. This is only going to address emergency. That ordinance is for emergency procurement. It will remain for emergency procurement, and that's in the predicament that we are today for these chemicals.
So you want to raise the threshold to $1 million to buy emergency supplies without having to come to City Council.
So the supplies are already under contract. What we're trying to address is be able to amend the contract to respond to the market index and the increase in pricing due to the shortage of those materials. So those are supplies that we buy today. Yes.
I understand that, but again, you're raising the threshold to $1 million without having to come to City Council. That's the issue that I have.
Right. So I'm doing that because I need to make sure that I can quickly move and respond to such emergency. We cannot take the risk of not having those chemicals on hand to add those to water.
Okay, I just have an issue with raising the threshold to $1 million without having to come to City Council. I think that we need to. I think you need to come to City Council if you're going to be spending $1 million. I just don't agree with that. So I'll be voting no on this. Sorry, but I think $1 million needs to come to us. So that's all I got. Thanks, Chairwoman.
Thank you very much, Alderman Garza. Alderman Irvin, followed by Alderman Ramirez Rosa, Thompson, and Riley.
Good morning, Chairman. Good morning, other members of the committee and Commissioner Velasquez. Real quick, we talked about this a little bit, and I think one question remains from the conversation. The $1 million that you're asking for, the increase that you're asking for, is that to deal with a differential? And, you know, for the example you gave that chlorine, you know, you contracted to buy it at $1 and now it's $1.50. Are you looking at the differential on that, or are you looking at the total price of it, number one? And number two, if the city it has a contract with someone and they can't meet their contract, is that on us or is that on them? Because they didn't predict. I mean, we buy salt and we buy salt at today's price and you deliver it later. That's a risk that somebody else is taking. So I'm just trying to just be clear. Are we like letting people out of their obligations purely just because of their issues, not issues of our own?
So it's to address the differential between the contract price, to answer your first question, between the contract price and market trends. And on the second part of the question, we are responding. This is not to let anybody out of their current commitment through a competitive process. These contracts went through a competitive process, and nobody, including vendors, ourselves, or anybody in the world, would have predicted what has happened in the last 2 years. These are extraordinary circumstances. There is no way that the vendor or the manufacturer would have known that we were going to be hit with this. These are trends that we're seeing not only in things that affect city, but it's also on our personal lives as well. Anybody that goes to a store will see that if you're trying to find certain materials, supplies that we would buy, they're either not there or limited, and the price are outrageous. So this is something that was unforeseen, and we're trying to make sure that these vendors, in some cases, are tied because they have to pay more for the material. And in normal circumstances, we would hold them to their contract. This is not a normal circumstance. We would hold them to the contract and say, here's what we negotiated. You have to provide the supplies at the current pricing. That's what you negotiated. In normal circumstances, it would have been on them to say, you know, this is what you negotiated and we're not letting you out of this to try and now get out of the competitive process and ask us for higher pricing. These are extraordinary circumstances. We all know they are. This is not something that is being, it's presented by one vendor. There's several vendors that are under this sort of shortage. And, they have tried to continue to provide us with the materials. But we already started to hear that if we don't act on this, they will stop the delivery of these chemicals and put us at risk.
So put the shoe on the other foot. I mean, how many times have we been let out of contracts that may have better terms today than when they were negotiated for the other side of the other party? It seems like we're being, I won't call it gouged, but we're being forced to live up to a standard that generally nobody else is living up to. So that concerns me, even though I understand it's a pandemic, but that's why we have contracts. And that's why we to the best of our ability, try to manage those types of risk. And it's on the supplier to manage that risk, and for the supplier to say, hey, I'm not delivering you chlorine because it's costing me more than what I'm selling it to you for. Is that necessarily on us to figure out?
So the suppliers have been trying to manage these extraordinary circumstances. I started here in September, and I've been hearing about the chlorine problem since I got here. I've looked at any different ways that we could have resolved this. And this desk today has the hands tied when it comes to current contracts and current supplies. That's what we're trying to address. The emergency is a temporary emergency. When these prices, when the market stabilizes and prices start going down, we will revert to contract pricing. We will stand behind the competitive process that we put in place and they agreed to, which is why they walked away with the contract. But today, we have to make a stop and consider what's going on in the world. Otherwise, we are risking not having these materials on hand, because the vendor will not be able to provide the inventory.
Yeah, I get that, but it seems like somebody's trying to put a gun to our head, and I don't like negotiating with somebody that's trying to put a gun to my head. That just doesn't feel right.
What-
And it seems like they're leveraging the fact that you have to have, we got to have chlorine for our water treatment, and I understand that. But I think that these folks need to live up to the commitments that they made at the time. That's why we enter into long-term contracts. It's like buying. If I go to the gas pump today, I got to pay the market price. But if I go and buy, 1,000 gallons of gas at a certain price and you just holding it, then that's a different conversation. We're not buying gas at the gas pump. We enter into long-term agreements to, take advantage of good pricing and the fact that we do use a lot of stuff. And I just don't feel like we're being treated right. And we make a contract and make a commitment. We paid them. They got their money, so they need to deliver what they said they were going to deliver at the time in which they delivered it, unless the contract has given some specific outs for them in that type of instance. And I'm not aware if they are or aren't. No one has said that. And if it does give that type of a piece, I understand that. But nobody to date has said, hey, if in these circumstances, we don't have to honor this price. You got to pay a different price. Is that the case?
So no, so to be clear, these vendors don't hold our inventory in their warehouses. We don't pay ahead. We pay as we need, and we place the order for the particular chemical. It's not that they have a certain inventory that we prepaid and they are releasing it as we call them up and to send the actual material. The material that is under contract. We place the order. It could be on a monthly basis, depending on what the material is. And at that point in time, the material is delivered. We don't have an inventory that we prepaid for them to hold on to. That's why the market has, and even if we had, which I don't see anybody doing that because it's just not advantageous to put your money out there a year ahead of what your needs are, instead of having that money within city and earn interest on it. So that wouldn't be something that I would recommend to begin with. But that's not what we do today. We place the contract has a specific price, and when the need is there to refill our inventory, then that order is placed. And obviously, you're gonna then pay what that market price is. In normal circumstances, there wouldn't be such a shift in pricing, and we would be paying maybe 3 to 5% a year for that material. That's contemplated in the contract. These are extraordinary times. That's not what's happening in the market today. The market is unstable, and because of the shortage, it is demanding these higher prices. And the vendors have been trying to comply with the contract and ship and sending us out the material, but this has been going on for a while. And so they can no longer do this.
You know what? I understand that we have to, do certain things, but I really don't like this. I don't want us to not have what we need when we need to have it, but I don't like how we're being treated in this circumstance. I think this COVID, I know we've got some challenges with COVID, but everybody's blaming everything on COVID, and it's driving inflation, it's driving a whole lot of things, and I just don't feel good about this. But what I don't want us to not have what we need to have when we need it. And I think we really need to get some clarity and understanding on our contractual positions as relates to some of these commodity items that we must have in order to function for the public welfare of our citizens. But this doesn't feel good, nor does it smell good, the way that this is people are being utilized in this type of manner. So,
I just want to say one more thing, if I may. This is an emergency and it's temporary. Okay, once pricing stabilize, the intent is to revert to negotiated contract price. This is just responding to the market and the supply and demand challenges. Just want to put that out there.
I get that, but here's my concern, and I'm gonna just say this: we make this move. I wonder if the pricing will ever go back down, and that's something that anecdotally we have seen in other instances where the new price is the new price, and these folks are laughing all the way to the bank. And I just don't want folks laughing to the bank on account of our residents and taxpayers of the city. So I'm hopeful that there will be some additional research that is performed on this. And also, I also am not sure as it relates to the reporting of how this is reported out when this is used. If this is an emergency, as I read the ordinance that's under your discretion, what seems to not necessarily be there is reporting back to us when this is being invoked, so that we understand that you have invoked these powers under the MCC, and that we get a report on that, and that we understand how much we are spending in addition to what we originally contracted to do.
So to respond to your first question, the amendment will have language that contemplates contract pricing will remain, will be restated once the market stabilizes and prices go down. So that will be part of the amendment language in that particular amendment for every single contract that we would need to take action on. Just to be aware, as it comes to reporting, there is a requirement in the ordinance for quarterly reporting to be presented to the city council on any action taken under the emergency ordinance. And I intend to comply with that.
Okay, very well. This is your first ordinance before us, so welcome to the city council, and you handled yourself well. You have a good day. We'll support this and move forward. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you, Alderman Irvin. The reporting requirement is quarterly, if I recall, so I think it's important to say that.
That is correct. Thank you.
Let me just ask the question before I go on to Alderman Ramirez Rosa. And you're probably going to say because it's a contract issue, but why would you not go back to the budget department to maybe negotiate, some changes in line items so that you could pay these costs in an emergency? Is it because it's a contract?
It's the contract. I don't have the authority to do that. I don't have the authority to do that for existing contracts. I have authority to procure any supplies under the emergency ordinance, any new supplies under new contracts, but I don't have the authority to affect current supplies under current contracts.
All right, thank you. Alderman Ramirez Rosa, followed by Alderman Thompson.
Thank you, Chair. So I'd like to remark that I think that this change warranted a briefing. I'm disappointed that the communication we received on this was an email and then a phone call. I certainly think that a change like this warranted more outreach in advance. My question is, can you provide any other examples thus far? I've only heard discussion of the purchase of chlorine and other chemicals. Are there any other examples where at this moment in time, a change in the city code in this manner would be warranted?
We're looking at aluminum is the other example that I think warrants the change.
And just so that I'm clear, the city is purchasing chlorine and aluminum to do what?
So chlorine is a chemical that is added to the drinking water. Aluminum is used for, if we need a stop signs in the city. And both, as you can see, are a threat to public health and safety.
Okay. And it appears that there's no sunset provision in the language that we've been provided. Is that correct?
The emergency will, the emergency amendment will end, and the contract will end once the emergency is it's no longer there. The ordinance today exists today, and all that we're doing is amending it to allow for the increase in the authority and to allow for to be able to amend existing contracts. That authority is there today.
So you will have a sunset provision in the contracts that you're negotiating. My question is in the city code, the language that's being added, there is no sunset for this specific provision. So moving forward, you know, if there's a declaration of emergency or if you deem it to be an emergency, then you'll be able to use this section of the city code.
That is correct. And that exists today. So that ordinance exists today. I am able to do that for new supplies under new contracts today. What is not allowing me today is what we have in front of us, which is current supplies, current contract.
Well, I will say, obviously, I certainly want the city of Chicago to have everything that it needs for health and safety. I'm still not quite sure that this is the correct approach to the problem that's been presented to us. I don't think I'm prepared to vote yes on this today, particularly without a sunset clause, because that would give me peace of mind to know that, you know, this is just a temporary change, but that, you know, it will revert back to the current threshold after a certain period of time. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Alderman Ramirez Rosso. Alderman Thompson.
Thank you, Madam Chair, Commissioner. A couple questions. So this current emergency procurement ordinance, do you know when was that approved?
2018.
This was approved in 2018. And when it was approved, was it 500,000 or was it another dollar amount?
Well, the original ordinance dates back to prior to 2018. It was amended in 2018, and it was amended to bring the dollar threshold to 500,000.
Okay, so it's 2018. So the concept of having this authority isn't new. It's
No.
just the dollar amount.
Correct.
Okay. Now, a couple things.
Alderman Thompson, the
Yes.
new part is modification of contracts. That is new. Isn't that accurate?
The modification of contract is new, and the amendment to increase the dollar threshold, the authority.
Right, right. So this has always been allowed for new contracts, but not modifications.
Correct.
Okay. Okay. And then, so a couple things just in the older language. I don't want to go back and read, but who defines what a bona fide emergency is?
So an emergency is, as I see the emergency, okay, is something that if not acted upon poses a negative impact to public health and safety.
But that's determined by you as from procurement, not by the city, not by it's okay. So that's, and then how many contracts, as we're talking about this, how many contracts are impacted?
So
I know you mentioned chlorine and aluminum.
So today I know of 4 to 5.
4 to 5 contracts. And so those contracts that you speak of, those are commodities?
Correct.
Okay. And in those contracts, I'm just not familiar with what those contracts say. We have a certain price and it's set for a certain price to buy X amount. And does the contract allow for price adjustment?
It does. Some of them allow, depending on what it is, it may allow 3 to 5%. It may have a price index tied to it. But the pricing today has exceeded all those terms that are embedded in the contract today.
Well, they couldn't, right? Because then they would be they would be
the market price. I'm sorry, the market price index.
I understand the market price, but if we contract with somebody and there's risk on both sides, so if you came to us through procurement and we approved a contract that said the pricing is $1 with subject to CPI increase up to 5% or 8%, if we approve that contract, then you already have the authority to adjust that pricing. So you wouldn't need to come back to us because it would have already been approved. Okay.
That's correct.
So what you're saying is that the contract that you have, those 4 to 5 contracts, those vendors are saying, we can't meet our pricing requirement in the contract. So is that what we're saying? In which
What we're
case
saying is that
they're
the
in violation of the contract.
in normal circumstances, I would agree that they would be in violation of the contract. But today, we all know that this is not them trying to get more money after they have a contract executed. We know that the market and the material shortages are what is pushing for these prices to be so unstable. And today, the price can be it's been increasing every single time.
No, I understand that, Commissioner. I understand that, but that's not my problem. I mean, they can hedge and they can buy futures. They can do all kinds of things. They can buy additional supply. In the contracts that we have, those 4 to 5 contracts that you're seeking a modification on, we're seeking to modify because the vendor is in violation. They're in default of their contract.
We're seeking to modify on a
Are they in
temporary.
default? Are they in default under the?
We have
contract?
not issued a default to these contracts yet, okay?
Okay,
And the reason for that is because we need the material. There is this one instance that we only get the material from this particular vendor, no one else. In the times that the particular chemical has been put out to bid, anyone else but the vendor that we have in place is the only vendor that provides it. And if we default, we're then at risk of not getting the material at all, because they won't be able to say, they will be able to defend the fact that in today's market, the pricing that's under contract is unrealistic. They can't deliver under those prices. That is what the manufacturer is charging them a lot more for them to be able to get those materials.
okay. Well, and when did we find this out?
So as I said earlier, I started here in September and I was trying to get through budget, and I was hearing this as I was coming on board.
Okay, so the only thing I would say is since September, it's now December, you've had more than enough time to come back to the budget committee or come back through procurement to the city council. We could have approved an amendment as a body.
In September, the pricing was still within contract terms. It was increasing, but it was still within contract terms. There was nothing from the vendor yet because the market was so unstable that would mirror what was going to happen in the next few months. And what we've seen is that it has continued to increase, where the contract terms do no longer can allow for the modifications that need to take place. And vendors are now threatening with not delivering the goods because they cannot afford it at the current contract price.
And there's only one vendor that provides.
For one particular vendor, yes. For one particular chemical, I'm sorry.
Okay.
And if we bid this today, so that's the other alternative, is to put it out to bid. We would be paying the demanding prices that they're asking today. So it's like we would be spending all this time risking not having the chemical on hand to be able to pay what the market is demanding today.
Okay, I understand that. Do you have an ordinance for that particular contract specific, not this blanket approach, but that specific contract or those 4 specific contracts set forth so we can vote on it as a body and understand, and we vote on it? That would resolve the issue. And instead of taking time to talk about what we're talking about, if we just go back with those particular contracts.
Well, the problem is that today, what I know today could probably change tomorrow. This is evolving as we speak. And I know of the ones that are demanding action today that are putting us at risk. I don't know what else the user departments are going to be facing. So I can only address what I know today. This is why if something comes down the pipeline, I need to be able to react to it to ensure our safety and security. And I can't do that today.
But I can tell you, September to December, this isn't like overnight pricing. We're not stock traders here where we need to act that quickly. If you see things happening or we can adjust, it's more of modifying the process of procurement than it is what we're doing here. So like, come back to us. We don't have that many. I can't imagine how many commodity pricings we have. It's not like we're going to have a law firm that's going to say, we can't meet our pricing on the flat rate fee that we decided to litigate this case on. We need an adjustment.
And just keep in mind,
There's enough time here that we don't have that many commodities.
and keep in mind that this modification and these changes, due to the emergency, are temporary. Okay, these changes are not meant to stick on the contract. They are temporary to address the emergency on hand. Once the emergency is no longer there, the pricings revert to negotiated contract price.
I agree, and I'll be done, Chairman, but
And
That's
make
full-
this the
comes full
last
circle.
question if you can. I've got
Yes.
a number of aldermen.
yes, Chairman, that's what I'm saying. We came full circle. It's a temporary during the bona fide emergency, which is defined by you. So that could continue on as long as you define it as emergency, and no one has the discretion but you. So that's the conundrum that we're in, is it's a cycle. I understand. I just don't see how many commodity pricing. I understand on aluminum and chlorine, and if you could put forth an amendment to the contract you have, I think this body would be able to vote on that.
The
you,
intent
Chair.
here. Well,
Thank you, Alderman Thompson. Alderman Riley.
Thank you, Chairman. Good morning, Commissioner.
morning.
I want to pick up where Alderman Daley Thompson left off. And I'm trying to understand this ordinance and why we need it. And I understand what you're dealing with on pricing for certain commodities. But explain to me in a bit more detail how you'll determine the crisis is over.
Well, we will monitor the particular supply. We will monitor the market in that particular supply. The user departments will be required to provide on a monthly basis market trends related to that particular supply, and we will validate that information in procurement. Once it stabilizes and it trends down for 60 to 90 days, it will revert. The emergency will cease and it will revert back to contract pricing.
Okay. I'm not sure I got an answer to that. So you're not going to peg a specific dollar amount as being regular pricing, therefore crisis averted. You're just going to keep an eye on trends, and when you feel like prices look a bit more reasonable, then you'll consider
when the pricing starts trending down. I mean, the expectation is that just like it has happened with other items, prices will come back to normal pricing before once the market stabilizes. And when that happens and the market continues to trend in that way for 60 to 90 days, we will then revert to contract price.
Okay.
And that will be contemplated as part of the amendment. That language will be included in the amendment. So the vendor will know that this is how we're going to react.
Okay. I'm more concerned about the city council's oversight and authority on these things. So this ordinance would also raise the cap from $500,000 to $1 million. Is that correct?
That is correct.
$1 million is an awfully round number. How did you come up with that?
Well, if you look at the trends on pricing, we have chemicals that are going up 100%. So, the average is 22 to 45, but we have necessary chemicals that are reflecting due to inflation 100% going up for pricing. So I need to be able to have enough authority to be able to amend the contracts to get us the chemicals and ensure that we have supply on hand through this emergency.
And how does removing city council oversight over that activity make this better for taxpayers?
It allows, it's not removing oversight because you will have what actions are taken here on a quarterly basis. What it does is allows this office to react, be flexible and react to the emergencies.
Okay, I'm not sure I'm satisfied with that answer either. All right, well, you know what, I'm gonna stop asking questions. I think I've heard enough. I agree with my colleagues. We're being asked to write that blank check to the administration. And as a legislative body, we have a responsibility to review these things. And if this, you know, if it truly is 4 or 5 contracts we're talking about here, well, let's have you go and amend those contracts and come to us, present these to us, and allow us to vote on them. If we're talking about hundreds of contracts, I could understand this could be unwieldy, but we're talking about 4 or 5. And again, the legislature has a role here. And in 2018, our authority and oversight was eroded because they lifted it from 250,000 to 500,000. Now here we are raising it to $1 million. And we're being told that this special authority will go away when a commissioner determines subjectively we're out of a crisis. And so for me, that's very problematic, and I won't be voting for this ordinance. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Alderman Riley. Alderman Wagasback.
Thanks, Chairman. Commissioner, just following up on my colleague's last couple inquiries here. So do you have city lawyers that review the contracts, somebody other than a non-attorney looking at these contracts to make sure there's not something other than just market pricing that you're looking at?
Yes.
I mean, we see, oh, I see Jeff Levine there. Maybe he's the one. But in terms of price gouging or anything else, how can you explain how these are reviewed other than what you keep referring to as market price? So are we looking, do we have a contract for phosphate that says they can't, in the event of an emergency, you know, which are both sides looking at that and determining that it is an emergency, or do we push back when they say, hey, we have to go X percentage up on this contract? Who reviews those contracts other than just a procurement officer?
The law department reviews the contracts as they're being put together and negotiated. Law department is very much involved.
Okay, well, we saw that with the weed contract and others that didn't work out quite as well as we had hoped. But my question here is, when somebody comes back with a price, are you reviewing it to make sure that the emergency provisions in there are correctly followed, or are we reviewing it as well for price gouging? Because we know we're in the pandemic, we get that part of it. We know that prices have gone up.
Right, we're reviewing it to ensure that the pricing, the price language and terms and conditions are followed, but we're also reviewing it to ensure that in this case, what are the options within contract terms to allow for whatever increases were negotiated back then. And in this case, the contract terms as they are today do not address this sort of emergency that we're under.
Okay, well, then maybe Jeff can jump in here. So are we saying we didn't correctly in this case? And I'm assuming you're referring to phosphate for the water department. So that contract didn't contemplate emergency provisions for excessive pricing or disproportionate pricing, something like that. I mean, basically what I want to know is, what does the contract for phosphate say? Because I was looking and I can't find that contract on your website. So I kind of wanted to read that and see exactly what you're referring to and why we couldn't review that contract and make sure, you know, you can explain to us that they're not price gouging here. Which they would be liable for, obviously, if they did. Sorry, Jeff, go ahead.
Chairman Dell, can I jump in with an observation?
Yes, you may. Identify yourself for the record.
Sure. Jeff Levine with the Law Department. I would note that the the code amendment being presented here is not an issue of transferring authority to the chief procurement officer that would otherwise reside with the city council. Under both state law and city law, the chief procurement officer is vested with authority to purchase goods and services following a competitive process. And so, Chairman Waguespack, what that means is, in your standard non-emergency situation, the city is assured of getting the relevant item at the necessary quality at the lowest possible price. What this amendment does is not to take authority away from the city council to review and approve such a contract. The only substantive change is that instead of requiring the chief procurement officer to advertise, it allows her to seek out the vendor who can immediately provide the item necessary to meet the emergency. So I simply state that because, again, this is not, this ordinance does not represent an attempt to shift contract oversight away from the city council.
Yeah, thanks for that explanation, Jeff. And I don't necessarily see that it completely does, but I think I was focused more on the fact that we don't get to see the specific contracts all the time. You know, this one, we're hearing about a phosphate one. I'm assuming that's for the water department for treatment.
I think those are typically, the last time I looked, the DPS website has a pretty robust library, if you will, of current city contracts.
I think I was just looking for this particular one to see if there was some updated version of it so they could look at it. I guess, Jeff, here's this last question. Do we need to review all of our contracts as we did, for instance, with the weed cutting contract, where we went back and law department reviewed them, I think updated them? Do we need to do a better job of including better emergency provision language in our contracts, or would that matter here at all?
I'm going to just speak briefly and then turn it over to the commissioner. I think that to try to insert emergency language in standard contracts would be unwieldy in light of the fact that it's unknown and an emergency is not capable of prediction.
Yeah. I mean, just in terms of commodities, I think we see them at different state levels and federal, and I'm not sure if we had them in here, but I appreciate that.
Thank you, Alderman Waguespack. Is that it?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
All right. Jeff, while we have you here, what would be your opinion on some kind of sunset clause in this particular ordinance?
Well, I think that this is an amendment to the code, and the particular code provision does not have a sunset. Both the state law and the city code provide that the determination of an emergency rests within the purchasing agent. And so I would say absent some clear suspicion that the purchasing agent is not functioning correctly.
No, I don't mean on the ability to do an make emergency decisions. I'm talking about on the cap.
Well, I think in light of the fact that from what I've seen, the cap is really intended to reflect current economic reality. I don't expect us to be going back to the kind of pricing that was present a decade ago or 2 decades ago. So I would say I don't view a cap as necessary, and I think the quarterly the provision for quarterly review provides a pretty good check and balance, if you will.
Okay, thank you for your opinion on that. Alderman Cardenas, followed by Alderman Smith.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
one of the things that I see pretty clear is that the procurement officer and even Jeff can probably enlighten us on the force majeure provisions of these contracts that nobody's talking about. Maybe there we could see that those folks are calling force majeure and therefore cannot provide or can no longer service the contract, and therefore new provisions must be in place. Procurement is obviously it's an area that right now is very active. Supply and demand's out of whack, and I understand the need to align that with our commodity purchasing. But we also have to look at these commodities. We should have procured certain commodities that are only serviced by one provider for a 3-year or even a 5-year cycle, so that we can even out emergencies like we're seeing right now, so that our pricing would be stable. If you buy natural gas in the market right now, and you buy it at winter, you're going to pay a significant higher price than if you buy it in the summer. I mean, everybody knows that. So, let's be smart about how we procure and how we purchase some of these commodities, and don't have to be talking about provisions and increase lines so we can buy at market now that everybody knows. You got to pay more. That's all. We got to figure this out. If we got contracts that are 5 years, let's strike that and say we need a 5-year contract for chlorine or whatever that is. So I want Jeff to talk about force majeure provisions in these contracts, so that at least we can understand exactly if that's something that's a call on them on the vendor, so as not to service the contract any longer.
Chairman Cardenas, I think that with respect to contracts that contemplate seasonal variation like natural gas, I believe that our contracting provisions do provide for the generic term is futures as a way to sort of balance out the swings in pricing.
Right.
Here, however, the kind of situation that the commissioner is talking about is not something that anybody would have predicted. And
well, but here, if we would have let's say we would have struck a deal with the phosphate or chlorine, it's a 3-year deal, and this is why futures markets are there, because of what we're facing right now. We would not be in a position where we would have to worry about pricing, because the vendor would have secured pricing for that contract. So if the vendor strikes a contract with someone like the city, that's a critical component, a critical commodity, then they must be serviced uninterruptible. Then the price is set, for a 5-year term, if you will, and therefore we don't have to worry about them not being able to go onto the market and get that. They should have struck a deal at the point of contract that we struck with them to whoever their vendor is, so they can service our contract. Hopefully, I'm not too vague on what I'm saying. So those are the kind of decisions that we need to make. I understand the need for $1 million. I'll support it because I think it is an emergency. But we also have to think critically about these commodities that procurement officers talking about, like chlorine. If it's only one vendor, then strike a contract on market prices when this all stabilizes. Don't do it for a year. Do it for 3-4 years, so that it does. So in case of an emergency, we don't have to face this kind of decision.
Thank you, Alderman Cardenas.
Thank you.
Alderman Smith, followed by Alderman Rodriguez, followed by Alderman King.
Yes, thank you. First of all, I'd like to be my attendance noted for the purpose of the quorum. I'm sorry for being late, Chairman. Okay. And I just want to say at this point that I'm very concerned about this ordinance, because I think there's a lot of confusion about exactly the scope and power here, and why at this moment, after a year and a half of an emergency, we need to have it right now. So I just want to express my concern and wonder whether we should hold it for a period of time so we can get some more answers. That's just a comment.
Thank you, Alderman.
Thank you.
Alderman Rodriguez, followed by Alderman King, followed by Alderman Osterman.
Yeah, very similar to Alderwoman Smith. Thank you, Madam Chair, for recognizing me. But I'm wondering why we didn't have briefings on this. I get this. First of all, I get the sense of the emergency, right? I get that in your voice and your presentation, Commissioner, as well. But I am concerned about the checks and balances in our government, particularly here in the city. And at the very least, if this is an emergency, I'm assuming it predated your time, Commissioner. We should have been talking about this some time ago. And, I first learned about this yesterday, right? So I am concerned. I have more questions. I'm not comfortable at this point supporting this. So I just wanted to state that. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Alderman Rodriguez. Alderman King, followed by Alderman Osterman, followed by Alderman Curtis and Laboris and Hairston.
Thank you. Thank you, Chairman. I just have some follow-up questions, I guess, along the same lines. I think there are two issues. There's this particular emergency, and then I think there's the ordinance in general, because the ordinance just doesn't reference, emergencies. It also says when the chief procurement officers determines that there's a need. So I think that's an issue. But I do think that you think, Chief, that there's an emergency that you need to react to. I'm not doubting that. I actually think it's a good exercise for this body to understand when there are emergencies. And so in that vein, I think that you should come before us to brief us or get our authority in order to move forward so that we can understand these crises when they happen. A couple questions that I hadn't gotten answered, like who is the vendor?
There are multiple vendors. There are multiple chemicals.
Okay. And the terms of the contract, is it 3 or 5 years, 1 year?
None of them are 1 year. They tend to be 3 to 5, some with options to extend.
And are the ones that you're considering emergencies, when do they end?
I'm not sure about that, when the contract term ends, because they have options to extend.
And so when in your, so how many are an emergency at this point? How many contracts are you considering?
I'm looking at 4 to 5 that I know of today. There's a larger list. I'm only considering 4 to 5 that fit the emergency.
Okay. And so let's take the most egregious one. When do you feel you have to make a decision by, I guess, when does our stockpile end? And so
there have been a vendor that particularly stopped delivering to the city as of November 30th. And so the inventory to begin with was low. So come January, we will not have inventory on hand.
And that's for just one or several, or
that's one that I'm aware of.
Right. And I think that's the one we should be, really taking a good look at, because I trust that you are concerned about the city's welfare. But I think, again, they're separate issues. I like being informed about these issues that impact our fiduciary responsibility, that we have. And so, I would like to look at this more nuanced. I don't see why, as these emergencies come up, why it would be problematic to come before us. Can you tell us why that might be. So you're saying, you know, by January, so we need to make a decision on that particular commodity soon. You know, I'm there with you.
So we need to ensure that we can react to this in a flexible way. There are other people competing for the same sort of supplies.
Sure.
And the longer we take to make a decision to accommodate the risk, the more risk we're undertaking that the supply will not be there for us. And so I am trying to ensure that that doesn't happen and that we don't put our citizens at risk because we don't have the authority to act swiftly on the matter.
Sure. And so I'll wrap up and try and end here, but I like I said, I think this body should be informed in emergencies like this because I think we should understand the gravity of COVID and other emergencies that impact, you know, kind of our fiduciary responsibility. So I would not want that taken away from this body. And so, you know, I think direct introductions of contracts or several of them, unless it becomes unwieldy, is not necessarily too burdensome. So I think we should be reacting to the several commodities that are coming up in January, which is right around the corner, but not necessarily to kind of a long-term, I guess, just open-ended change in legislation that does, you know, kind of take our authority away. I guess I disagree with an earlier, you know, an earlier comment about not taking kind of our authority away. So that's it for now, Chairman.
Thank you, Alderman King. Alderman Osterman, followed by Alderman Curtis, followed by Alderman McGuinness and Hairston.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Commissioner, I want to offer a friendly suggestion after listening to this entire debate and the concerns of my colleagues, and that would be that there would be a 9-month sunset provision put in this ordinance that would allow you to take effect and use the ordinance in emergencies, but give the city council time to see how it's implemented. And I think that the concern that you're hearing from us is kind of that while you're describing 4 to 5 contracts and an open-ended emergency, we're concerned that that could be used in a different way that would take away our responsibility for oversight. So take it in a positive suggestion that will allow you to do what you need to do, but and that's only if my colleagues would go along with that. But I think there's concerns about how this could be implemented, and given the small amount of scope of how many contracts we're talking about, it could give you the flexibility. We could see how it's implemented, and then if there's concerns, then we can end it. Or but I just, given everything I've heard today, I think I would ask you to entertain that. And if my colleagues would go along, it could be something that we could work on collaboratively. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you, Alderman Osterman. Alderman Curtis.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. You know, I want to echo something that Alderman King said. I think the body should also understand what is an emergency. I have a story that's similar to this, and I'm going to ask the commissioner if this fits the story. About 10 to 12 years ago, of course, I wasn't with the governmental body. I was superintendent with streets and sanitation. And we had mild winters, you know, all around those years, about 10 to 12 years ago. One year, we had a very, very hard winter. and the city thought that they had enough salt on hand. It panned out that the city didn't have enough salt. And it was very, very hard for us to get salt. They even told the drivers not to push only when necessary and don't drop salt on every street. I can say that now that I'm with the governmental body, but of course I couldn't say that when I was with Streets and Sanitation. We did not have enough salt that year. I guess they didn't anticipate on having a bad winter, but it did happen. And like I said, about 10 to 12 years ago, if any aldermen remember, our streets was a block of ice and everyone ran to the commissioner. But the fact of the matter was there wasn't enough salt. It wasn't enough salt on hand to get through the winter. So that's something to think about, whichever way you vote on this. I do remember a story similar. That's it, Madam Chairman.
Thank you, Alderman Curtis. Alderman Raboris, followed by Alderman Hairston, followed by Alderman Haddon.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I do want to make Commissioner Velasquez, you're handling this pretty good, but I have to concur with some of my colleagues, in particular my colleague from the 35th Ward, that we probably should have had some briefings on this matter. However, Commissioner, you mentioned I think one solution was chlorine and phosphate. Is this specifically for water treatment?
Correct. Those are some
Right?
chemicals for water treatment.
Yeah, and we use chlorine, phosphate, carbon, and sulfate as well. And the thing is, you know, I don't know that it should be classified as a emergency right now because we don't use as much water now as we do in the summertime. However, the city of Chicago currently uses price hedging when it comes to fuel for this time of the year. I would strongly consider talking to AIS Commissioner David Reynolds, who does this from year in, year out, price hedging. I did this when I ran the fuel department for the city of Chicago many years ago. I would strongly consider you looking into the chemicals that are used for water purification to see if we can get into a price hedging account with other municipalities. It's very, very important. But I, you know, and I understand, I fully understand where my colleagues are coming from, that we need to be notified ahead of time. Some kind of briefing would help. But I would strongly look into price hedging when it comes to chemicals that are used for water treatment plants, Commissioner. And that's pretty much what I talked to David Reynolds, Commissioner. He knows about this, the process. Thank you.
Thank you, Alderman Raboris. Alderman Hairston.
Thank you. I am not going to be long. I understand what you're saying. However, we're only talking about four to five contracts, as you said. So if the water treatment contract, if that's most pressing, then that one needs to come before City Council. We have the capacity to meet within 48 hours. We are not afraid to do our jobs. We want to do our jobs. And it is our responsibility. We also have to look out for the taxpayer and the taxpayer dollars. I mean, this is what our job is. We haven't seen the contracts, and, at the end of the year and right before budget comes, then we're going to be looking at, what we've done as a council. And I heard one of my colleagues talking about streets and sanitation and the salt trucks, but I'm also looking at, we've had salt trucks out idling, all week, and we've had no snow. So those are those are the things that we need to be looking at. How much are we spending having these salt trucks out there ready for snow that's not going to come or that's not here? So, you know, we do take our responsibility very serious. And, you know, I would agree that maybe you hold this, maybe we just deal with that one contract right now and then revisit it. We are slowly chipping away over the years at city council's ability to have oversight. And I think that's a bad road to go down. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Alderman Hairston. Alderman Haddon?
Thank you, Chair. Hi, Ms. Velasquez.
How are you?
I'll echo some of my colleagues' concerns. I'm not a member of this committee, but clearly we've got council coming up, and this is a decision we'd all be asked to vote upon come Wednesday. We've had some really great questions and answers and debate, and I'm fully supportive of us having these types of conversations in person, but would encourage you and our IGA team to make sure that important matters like this, we get briefings on. I definitely see, and it's taken me listening, right, and having some of these conversations to try and get an understanding of what you're asking of us. And the understanding that I believe I have, I think what you're asking of us is very reasonable. You know, you've got very quick decisions to make. This isn't a new ordinance. This is an increased dollar amount threshold. I get that, and that makes a lot of sense to me. And so I'm personally supportive of what you're asking. I do see this as different than, this isn't the same as, you know, the kind of emergency powers that we've given, right, to, you know, our CDPH commissioner or to the mayor's team, right? Like, I get this as different. I just want to really underscore, though, that we all care deeply about these types of decisions. I think we can hear from our colleagues that our fiduciary responsibility, our responsibility to our residents and to the electorate, we all take highly that responsibility, which means that we need time to digest. And the work that you do and your department does is complex, right? Thinking about commodity markets and the different needs that we have, core minerals, the unique situation that we're in. It's not fair, even with as quick as some of us can be, I think, to expect us to absorb all of the information and be asked to make a decision in this time frame. So I would respectfully ask that we have a little more time in the future on these types of decisions. I appreciate Chairman Dowell saying that we could get the reporting on some of these pieces, but we'll also echo my colleague Alderman King and a few others in saying that if there is a space, and I'm not sure, maybe Chairman Urban, this is within contract and oversight equity, like I'm not sure which committee this lives in, but I do think that the council and the public would benefit maybe from a deeper understanding of some of these volatile commodity markets and the decisions that you're asked to make for the city, especially because I don't see it changing in the very near future. With some of the financial reports that we're hearing, with some of the supply chain disruptions, with a lot of things happening with climate change, this is going to be more our standard. And I think you most likely will have to make a lot of quick decisions in the foreseeable future. And so I would request, if you want to think about this and take this back and through the chair, whichever chair would be appropriate, I think it would be wonderful to get more regular reporting, not just on the contract piece and the dollar amount, but actually on our city's supplies, on what we need, on some of these core things, so that we're developing more of that relationship so that we can give you the trust that you need from us to do the job and serve the residents, but so that we also have the information that we need to be able to do our jobs and uphold our side. So just a request going forward, and appreciate you bringing this to us today. So thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Alderman Haddon. Alderman Lopez?
Good morning, Chairman and members of the committee. I don't want to rehash a lot of what's been discussed. Not a member, but I do support a number of my colleagues, all of my colleagues, in fact, who've asked for this matter to be held. I do want to take a moment and thank Ms. Velasquez and Shauna as well for giving me a call this morning at around 9:30 to discuss this ordinance. And I'm going to say something that I said to them, that I do not blame necessarily the department for the short amount of turnaround and discussion when the administration knew this was coming and didn't say anything. I do want to say that if this matter is in fact held, Madam Chairman, that I know our colleague Alderman Osterman had suggested a sunset. One of the things that I had suggested to the department was that a 90-day window be used to make emergency decisions. And that reporting back to the council, since it calls for quarterly reports, that a vote be taken on authorizing and making permanent whatever adjustments the chief procurement officer makes on an emergency basis. This way, she can address things in the here and now, and that we can then in turn make them permanent if we need to, or we can make them semi-permanent based on market condition. What I fear is that, as so many have said, we are giving away our authority carte blanche. There will always be an emergency. And as our former mayor famously said, you never let an emergency go unused. And I think that will continue to be the case if we have no oversight and restrictions on what is classified as an emergency. We've talked about phosphates. We've talked about the issue, two contracts in particular, one that, put us in a lurch about 10 days ago and one that's coming up. But there are other issues that we're seeing in other departments as well. We know there's supply issues in CDOT, for example. Something as innocuous as speed bumps, we cannot install this year, for those of you who don't know, because we don't have it. Light poles are another issue. Smart lighting light bulbs, for those of you without lights, are another issue. Are all of those to be characterized as emergencies now? Are we going to upend all of our contracts now because of this ordinance? Or are we going to actually have factual discussions as to what's really going on in this city and how we're not providing services because we cannot meet the demands based on what's going on around us? What I had proposed, and I think Chairman, this goes to either yourself or to Chairman Irvin with regards to contract oversight and equity, as Alderman Haddon had suggested, is that we need to discuss whether or not our contracts are adequate in this new world we find ourselves in. Because if we're going to do this in a piecemeal fashion, then I recommend that we start putting out brand new RFPs to reflect new pricing so that we get the true answer and know what the true cost is moving forward, at least in the foreseeable future. So I would ask this committee, though I'm not a part of it, to not only hold this, but possibly work jointly with Chairman Irvin so that we get to the truth of the matter with regards to where we're at with our contract.
Thank you,
I know Ms.
Alderman.
Well,
Thank
I
you,
was going
Alderman.
to say that I also appreciate Ms. Velasquez, who I know came in during budget and is still now putting the pieces together, trying to put us on the right course. But I don't think Band-Aid solutions are going to get us through this. We need a more thoughtful process and a long-term process. I don't think any of us believe that come Christmas, everything's going to go back to normal. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you, Alderman Lopez. Given all of the discussion this morning and some of the comments made by many members of the Committee on Budget and Government Operations, we will hold this item and get back to the regular order of the agenda to discuss the subject matter hearing that is also on the agenda. I appreciate all of the comments made and hold on, we'll be back, or they'll be back.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. The next item on our agenda We will now begin with the subject matter hearing item regarding the Foreign Fire Insurance Board's expenditures of monies from the Foreign Fire Insurance Tax Revenue Fund pursuant to Section 4-308-025 of the Municipal Code of Chicago. The summary of the projects previously was emailed to all aldermen on December 6th. This is a subject matter hearing and no vote will be taken on this item. We have with us today Foreign Fire Insurance Board Member Chair, Pat Cleary, as well as all the elected members of the board, Charles Knirk, Rory Osei, Pat Quain, Brian Stack, Robert Tebbins, and Commissioner Halt, who is ex officio. We also have with us Aaron DeCamp, General Counsel of the Chicago Fire Department, Sandra Blakemore, the Managing Deputy Commissioner of AIS, Robin Owens, Deputy Commissioner of AIS, and John Waddell, Deputy Commissioner of AIS. Again, this is a subject matter hearing and no vote will be taken. Pat Cleary, you have the floor along with Robin Owens.
Okay. Good morning, committee members. My name is Pat Cleary, and I'm here to give you an update on our expenditures for the year. We did kitchen renovations. We bought boots for squad members. We bought escape belts and harnesses for squad members, dive equipment for Air Sea Rescue and Squad, water rescue equipment for all engines and trucks, thermal imaging cameras for trucks, kitchen flatware and utensils for all firehouses, couches and recliners for all firehouses, EMS MedPro coats for EMS members, winter overalls and helmets for OFI members, SCBA disinfectant for all firehouses, 5-gallon water service for all firehouses, ice machines, EMS winter boots, air purification systems for all ambulances, air purification units, 2 per district, battery operated transfer pump guzzlers, 800 Gerber EMS parkas, 60 Paratech Rapid extrication kits, dishwashers for the firehouses, refrigerators, task force foam reductors for engines, dive communication systems for squads and Air Sea Rescue, smoke machines for the academy, extrication spreaders and cutters for the academy, 4 buggies, an ambulance training unit for the new West Side Academy, 2 air mass delivery trucks. And that's the end of it. If you have any questions on those purchases.
For purposes of the committee, can you please explain, again, it never hurts to hear it more than once, the Foreign Fire Insurance Board, how you get your resources to do what you do in our communities, just for...
Anytime an insurance company that's located outside of Illinois has a policy within Illinois, they pay a 2% tax, and we get that money.
What's the total amount that you received in 2020 and 2021 so far?
So this is Pat Kwan. I'm the treasurer of the Foreign Fire Tax Board. Received in 2020, and it comes, they have to report to the comptroller on July 15th. So in 2020, there was $6.1 million that was given to the Foreign Fire Tax Board. To date, for that money, we've spent $3.9 million. We do have a couple of large expenses that are coming up that weren't factored into that. So we got almost $800,000 in fitness equipment that we'll be able to get to the firehouses as soon as we get that contract ironed out. And then also we also have some the expenditures with extrication equipment for the trucks. We're waiting to see the different approvals on if we're going to get them for all the trucks in the city or only certain trucks that respond to the expressways in the city. So we're waiting at the direction of the department for that. So We pretty much have that all. I believe this year we're for 2022, it's roughly going to be around $7 million, I think is what came in.
And this is Aaron DeCamp from the Chicago Fire Department. That money rolls over from year to year. It does not expire at the end of each year.
Okay, thank you for that explanation. We're going to go to questions now from my colleagues if you all are finished with your presentation.
Yes.
Okay, Alderman Michelle Smith.
Thank you, Chairman. Do you have a list of which firehouses were the beneficiary of your spending? Could you please provide that?
That was emailed to you, Alderman Smith, on Monday.
I apologize. I will go find it. Thank you.
We will-
That's the only
we
question I
will
have until I
send
look
it.
at it. Thank
We will
you.
rescinded. And looking at the list, I see a couple of projects in your ward.
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to look at it before I ask any other questions. So why don't you move on? Thank you.
Alderman Irvin?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. Quick question. Does the, I know that this is a creature of state statute and this 2% coming to the city for use by this particular board. Do they follow or are they required to follow city procurement rules, number one? And number two, I believe that we do, but correct me if I'm incorrect, we appropriate this money in a blanket form on an annual basis as part of our budget process.
We do follow
Yes.
city.
I'm sorry, I was answering the second question. Yes, we do appropriate in the annual budget process. And then the other question, I'll go back to the board.
What was your second question?
My question, actually, the first question dealt with following the regular city procurement rules as relates to the purchases that you're making. And after you answer that, I have a follow-up question.
Yes, we do follow city procurement procedures.
And that's, this is Aaron DeCamp from CFD. That's also pursuant to municipal code as well.
Okay. And thirdly, this is my final question. Some of the items that you sounded like you purchasing is, like you said, like specific types of suits or other materials, like you said, jumpsuits. Is that an item you referred to?
OFI. Yes, we bought them jumpsuits and helmets.
Okay, is that like
fire
part of what their
investigators.
uniform is?
Pardon me?
Isn't that like part of their uniform?
They don't have these types of jumpsuits.
But isn't that that's not part of the uniform, so that they would purchase on their own?
It was an item that they did not have, and special operations came to us and requested that we purchase them for them. And we voted on it, and we did.
But and I'm just asking this because it's not something that they should be purchasing out of whatever allowances or other things that would afford it to them in other ways.
No, they have to wear city-issued garments. They can't go out and buy what they want.
Okay, so you all, and again, I'm asking this because I honestly I don't know. Like, so you all don't get like a quarterly or semi-annual, annual uniform allowance where you go and purchase materials for your uniform and the like.
Anything we have is city issued. The city, like those OFI jumpsuits are now part of their inventory.
Okay.
They are now allowed to have those.
So like, for example, you have a uniform on, as I see, and you don't go buy that uniform, the city gives you that uniform.
Yes.
Okay, then that's fine.
I cannot go.
Thank you. I did not know that. Thank you. That's all, Madam Chairman.
Thank you, Alderman Irvin. Final question. I don't see any other hands up. Do you have to report or can you report MBE, WBE spend on the money that you, or the projects that you've procured for?
I didn't hear the beginning of your question.
Can you report out MBE and WBE spend on the projects that you've done, since you follow city procurement requirements?
Camp says he could provide that for you. I don't have that.
Yeah, I think all the vendors we use are through the procurement process, so we can provide that information separately, yes.
Okay, if you could provide that through the chair. Thank you very much. Alderman King?
It just a quick question. How do you decide which fire engine companies you're going to fund the projects for?
It's based upon, most of it's dependent upon need. So if an old firehouse needs a new kitchen, we'll renovate their kitchen. And a lot of this is brought to us by the building department as well.
Yeah,
So
AIS provides a list to us of what they see. They prioritize certain houses that may be in need of air conditioning, or like in one case, we did a kitchen project, and that was all determined and given to us by AIS.
Okay.
Good afternoon. This is Robin Owens, Deputy Commissioner from AIS. I just wanted to elaborate on what was just mentioned about us providing recommendations to the Foreign Fire Insurance Board as it relates to the operational needs and the geographic equity of the firehouses that are in need. So we do provide those recommendations and the information to arm them with the proper data to base their approval on.
Okay, I don't see any in the fourth ward, so I'm just curious on how that happens. And this is just this year, right? This is just this fiscal year? Or?
Yes.
Okay, so it'd be cool to see over the last few years kind of who you funded. Is that something we can get through the chair?
Sure.
Okay, and the last question is just the diversity of the board. Is it diverse?
It's elected by the membership. Whoever gets elected is on the board.
Okay, but that
like a break. I could give you a breakdown of what it is.
Yeah, that was my question. Is it diverse?
The commissioner's on it. That's a black female, and then there's 6 white males.
Okay. All right. I just would like the fire companies over the last few years. Like I said, I don't see.
What neighborhood?
I've got a couple. I've got one they're both in Bronzeville, but one's in Grand Boulevard and the other's in Douglas. And I don't see them on here at all.
Do you know what company's there?
I don't know the company number right off the top of my head. But
34th and Calumet, is that one of yours?
Yes.
Is
that on there?
That's going to be voted on in January to get them an ice machine. I know that much.
Okay. Then I have one on Cottage, 4,500.
They got an ice machine.
An ice machine?
Yes.
Okay. I just see like HVAC upgrades, kitchen remodels.
Yeah,
So
Engine 45 was recently renovated.
Okay, so if you could send me over the last few years, I just don't see them on this current list. I just want to understand kind of how that is determined.
It's determined upon need and upon if the house captain contacts us and says, hey, we need a new refrigerator, we'll put in a motion to purchase them a new refrigerator. That's how it's pretty much done.
Sounds good.
And there are projects coming up that was introduced for upgrades in air conditioning that may involve some of the firehouses in their wards. They've been brought forward. Obviously, we've seen kind of a change in pricing on air conditioning that in some cases have gone up over 100%. So the board's investigating more of that before we go forward in our replacing some of those air conditioning units within some of the older firehouses.
All right. So I'm looking forward to the list just to see what's been done and what's about to be done. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Alderman King. Alderman Napolitano.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just got a brief question on behalf of what a great program this actually is too. Is it possible that you gentlemen can kind of give a brief or a quick breakdown of, I know there's an extensive list of items that have actually gone to every single firehouse. Can you give a quick breakdown of what like some of those items are that you guys are able to purchase that goes to every firehouse?
I did state that when I gave you guys the breakdown, but I'll go over it again.
I was just asking because I know a lot of people probably haven't seen this breakdown and kind of emphasize how great this is and what you're actually doing.
Okay. Every engine and truck in every firehouse throughout the city received water rescue equipment. Every truck got an additional thermal imaging camera. Every firehouse got kitchen flatware and utensils. Every firehouse got couches and recliners. Every firehouse got SCBA disinfectant. Every firehouse got 5-gallon water service. Every firehouse has.
Can you provide that list through the chair for what you're reading off? Because all you gave us was the individual projects by ward. It'd be good to have the list that you're reading off. You can continue.
Every firehouse has access to air purification systems. Those were bought as a result of COVID. They're held at district. All they have to do is request them and they can have them brought to the firehouse. In the past, as we reported to you last year, every firehouse got microwaves, power washers, coffee makers, snow blowers, garbage bags. Every member got particulate barrier hoods and firefighting gloves. 91 of the firehouses are on the list to get new refrigerators. Every engine is going to get a foam ejector. Every truck so far, we agreed upon to purchase them a rapid extrication kit. Every medic got an EMS parka. Every medic got firefighter boots.
Awesome. You know what? I just wanted you to point this out. I mean, what you guys are doing is just absolutely amazing for every one of these firehouses, and I appreciate it. And I just want to know on behalf of our side, on council side and the city side, are we properly representing you guys as well and making sure that a lot of these vendors that you guys are utilizing too are getting paid and getting paid on time?
Okay.
There is a little issue with the water issue. It's been a huge success for guys in the firehouse with this bottled water, and it more was an issue on the vendor and invoices and stuff. But I know the service was disrupted for a little bit. I'm hoping that it's back on track. And then the only other issue we had, obviously, was with the work relative to workout equipment. So every house is either going to get a treadmill, a stair mill, or an elliptical from the Florida Fire Tax Board, and we're only going to hopefully build upon it. The problem is Life Fitness doesn't have a contract with the fire department. They have a contract with the police department, and we tried to work to see if we can piggyback on that contract. It didn't work out. It's in the process right now of going. I think it's in the law department right now for the contract. Hopefully with Life Fitness, and within the next couple of months we'd be able to roll that out. Like I said, that's almost $1 million project to bring workout equipment to our firehouses.
Awesome. And I just want to make sure, and you guys are awesome. I'm just making sure that we're properly representing you guys as well, and making sure you're getting what you need for the men and women of the Chicago Fire Department. And we're not leaving you kind of holding the bag and with the CFD name on it, that it doesn't make you look bad for any of your vendors. So I'm glad this is kind of brought to light, and please any way that we can help you to make sure that this is remedied and done properly. I just love you guys to death. I appreciate all that you're doing. So keep up the great work. And I appreciate the opportunity to speak on behalf of this, Madam Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you, Alderman Napolitano. So on behalf of the committee, I want to thank the Foreign Fire Insurance Board members for their presentation today, and we'll see you next year.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
All right, the last item on our agenda is a subject matter hearing item regarding the quarterly update on the fiscal year 2021 annual appropriation presented by Budget Director Susie Park of OBM. This is for the third quarter of 2021. This report was emailed to all aldermen on December 6th. This is a subject matter hearing only, no vote will be taken. And with us today, we have our Budget Director, Susie Park, our CFO, Jenny Bennett, and our City Comptroller, Reshma Soni. We will now hear from Director Park.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm going to share my screen. I know, oops, it's been disabled. 1 second. Okay.
Chairman Dow, can you add me to the quorum?
Yes, Alderman Mitz, love your Santa hat. We'll add you to the quorum. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Good morning, Chairman Dahl and Vice Chairman Silverstein and members of the Committee on the Budget and Government Operations. Thank you for allowing me to be here today to provide an update on the city's budget through the third quarter of 2021 for the period ending September 30th. As Chairman Dahl mentioned, we did send this report out, but I will go through the screen just to show and pinpoint certain numbers. On the revenue side, starting with the revenue report, overall, the city is about 16% above the 2021 budget expectations through the end of September. Similar to the discussions we had in quarter two, transaction tax continued to perform well, which includes the personal property lease tax. Other revenues such as income tax revenue, sales tax, and personal property replacement tax revenue also continued to trend the same from the second quarter and continues to perform over budget expectations. Recreation tax is also up from second quarter and is now showing slightly above budget expectations. However, other revenues, which we anticipated a slower recovery and did talk about last quarter from the pandemic, continue, however, to show signs of recovery, but are still taking some time to recover. This includes the transportation tax and business taxes. We will continue to monitor these revenue sources and the impact of the pandemic. I know last time when I was here for second quarter, we were talking about Delta. We have heard about Omicron coming. It's something that we're going to continue to monitor how it impacts our revenues. On to the expense side. In terms of our expenses, overall, we are at about 66% of the corporate budget through the end of September. Most departments, as you see here, are somewhere between 60 and 75% of their budget. Just to pinpoint a couple outliers that are showing some higher percentages, we did talk about it last quarter, some Department of Housing. They're slightly higher due to encumbrances, which they did put at the beginning of the year for their delegate agencies. OEMC is also showing a slightly higher percentage. This is mostly due to personnel costs for our traffic control aides who reimbursement will come at the end of the year, and then we will make that adjustment accordingly. The other thing, which we also flagged last quarter, is finance general is slightly lower. It's mostly because of payment timing. Things such as pension payments will go out at the end of the year, if not at the beginning, most likely at the beginning of the next fiscal year in the first quarter. So that's the general report for third quarter. I know we've had a lot of conversation, so nothing new surprising in the third quarter as we were discussing the budget. One last reminder is that as the committee is aware, we did make, as part of the 22 budget process, some amendments to the 2021 budget. That will take effect in the next quarterly report. So you will see those amended figures when we report out quarter four, since those amendments did take effect upon passage in October. With that, I will turn it back over to Chairman Dahl. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Director Park. I don't see any hands up among the aldermen, so I will assume that there are no questions on the third quarter report. So, Director Park, I don't know if CFO Bennett or Comptroller Sony want to add anything or say anything, and if not, we'll thank you for being with us this morning and move on.
Thank you,
Okay.
Chairman.
There being no further business before the committee, can I get a motion to recess until Friday, December 10th at 3:00 p.m. by the affirmative vote of all members present for the roll call to determine quorum? No one wants to come
Make a
back on
motion,
Friday?
Chairwoman Dow, Alderman Wagisbeck.
Thank you, Alderman Wagisback. So moves. Hearing no objection, the committee stands in recess until Friday, December 10th at 3 p.m. Thank you.